And I think it is really important to do your homework and maybe not just go with, the sales. Like if you purchased a property through a sales agent, maybe don't just go with their property management arm. Have a look around and see what other options are out there.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share conversations I've enjoyed with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits this has created. Get Invested helps you to live more, work less, and leave a legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, to make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living the dream. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at khgroup.com.au/Get Invested. Thanks for listening, and let's get invested. Welcome back to Get Invested, Freedom Fighters. If you're a property investor or you're thinking about it, what do you think makes or breaks your investment success? You may be surprised to hear that it's all revolves around property management. Now, if you've got a good property manager, your investment journey can be a dream. However, if you get an average property manager, or worse still, you decide to try and do it yourself, then it often leads to financial and very stressful disaster. Now, despite this, 70% of current property investors still self-manage their property. And those that do decide to get a property manager tend to just focus on getting the cheapest fees. Now, believe me, there's a lot more to it if you're going to be successful. And I think it's probably the reason why 50% of first-time property investors sell their property within the first 5 years, never to return. So what makes a good property manager? And how do you choose a good one? Well, this is where today's guest comes in. Lauren Robinson is a multi-award-winning property manager, and she's owner and director of her own company, Rental Results. They're a dedicated and professional property management firm based in Brisbane in Queensland. Now, Lauren's been in the industry for years, and she's recently published a book called Rented. And today we talk about this, and we also delve into her experience and expertise to help you to minimise your risk and to maximise your return, and most importantly, enjoy your property investment journey when you decide to put your future into property. So please enjoy Lauren Robinson. Okay, we're back on Get Invested today, and we've got the pleasure of talking to Lauren Robinson. Lauren is an award-winning property manager who runs her own business. She's also an author, but without me getting into the details of it, welcome to Get Invested, Lauren.
Oh, thanks very much for having me, Bushy.
Great to have you here. Now, really looking forward to drilling into our journey today, and I'm a big fan of property managers, given they are absolutely pivotal to the property investor experience. But before we sort of drill into some of that, can you tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're doing it?
Yeah, so I guess I have over 14 years experience now in the property management industry. And I own a business in Brisbane called Rental Results. And I started investing when I was 21.
Okay.
And had a great experience and was working in a property management office at the time, surrounded by mentors. And that's sort of how I guess I started my property journey initially.
Okay. And let's go straight there then. So you bought your own property, your first property at 21, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So I bought it. Yep. So when I was 21, I was living in a share house with some of my friends, and I thought, and I was surrounded by people purchasing property and working in property management at the time. And I guess that sort of really spurred me on that. I thought I actually really want my own investment property or my own property to live in initially, and then, make that an investment as well. So, so started looking. It took me about a year to find something that I was happy with. I ended up purchasing in Paddington in Brisbane. Nice.
Okay. And tell me about your thinking around that time. What motivated you to want to invest in property at that tender age, Lauren?
And I guess the fact that I was seeing people invest every day of the week and it just sort of became the norm. That's what I was living and breathing. And I was also managing people's investment properties. So I just found it really exciting. And whenever I saw someone purchase a new property, I just felt like I really wanted to get involved and start doing that. So and I guess the first thing I did was I went and saw a mortgage broker and just wanted to know how much could I actually borrow at 21,
Smart move.
and what would be the repayments, and just to get more of an understanding about how much of a deposit I need. And then I started looking, well, now that I know how much I could borrow, where can I live? What can I afford to buy?
Awesome. Okay, well, what you're demonstrating there straight off the bat is that you're getting your ducks in a row by pre-planning, whereas a lot of people we see in the property market focus on the property and then try and work the rest out afterwards. So awesome work on that. Let me take a step back then. So you're obviously working in property management at that stage. If we go back to the time that you decided to get into property management, what was it that attracted you into the property management arena?
I guess I initially, I mean, growing up, I'd never really heard of property managers. I grew up in country town, and my parents had an investment property, but I didn't really have anything to do with it. And then I moved to Brisbane for uni, and I rented, and we dealt with a property manager, but it was never something that I thought, I definitely want to do that. And I think I got into sales initially, and then realised, that's actually quite hard when you're 19. So I then sort of fell into property management, and I was really lucky to get to be approached by a property management only company in Brisbane.
Right.
And I had fantastic training there. So, and I worked there for 8 years before they sold the business. But they grew over that time. When I started, they had about 400 properties, and they grew to nearly 2,000 over those 8 years that I worked there.
Massive. That's massive growth. Did they do that all by organic lettings, or do they were they buying rent rolls, or how do they manage to generate that massive level of growth over that time frame?
Yeah, so they were one of probably the first property management only companies in Brisbane, and I guess they sort of pioneered that specialist or specialisation in the market. So that really helped, and I think they had a really good focus on customer service. So it was a really customer-centric business. They did buy a small rent roll, but over the time they really grew the business. Majority of the business was organic growth.
That's a tremendous. It's a real testimony to obviously the quality of service that you're providing as a team at that point in time, because that is exceptional growth.
Definitely.
Okay, so property managers are a unique beast in my experience, Lauren, because you're quite often dealing with very emotive and quite conflicting needs at times between what the landlord's looking for and what the tenant's wanting. And you're obviously a seasoned campaigner, because I haven't spoken to too many who've survived over 10 years in property management. So talk to me about the qualities that you bring to the table, and obviously those that you engender in your own property management business now that have enabled you to survive, prosper and enjoy that property management career.
Yeah, I think organisation is a big part of it, and you have to really be on the ball with a lot of things. I think not taking things personally, which is easier said than done, but a lot of the time, we are the middle person, and at the end of the day, we work for the landlord, and obviously the landlord wants to make sure if their tenant is their customer, so we're sort of in the middle there trying to manage that relationship.
Yes.
And it can be difficult at times, but I think having a thorough understanding of the legislation and just relying on that knowledge, and also making sure your organisational skills are there. You also have to, marketing, counselling, we wear a number of hats. And it's just, trying to balance everything and just remember that we are dealing with humans at the end of the day.
Yes, yeah, absolutely right. We're talking real people, and it's at that sort of fundamental personal level. Now, just talking that through, then the key qualities that you think, because from my knowledge, and this may be out of date, Lauren, but to my understanding, I think there's still 70% of residential investment properties that are privately managed or that the landlord self-manages them. If you were talking to someone who's doing that, what are the benefits of using a dedicated professional property manager over trying to do it yourself, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, very difficult to manage your own property because, for one, you're not only emotionally attached to it. I don't manage my own investments in the office, and I think, sometimes you're not thinking clearly. Keeping up with the legislation and the knowledge, there's about, so you've got your Residential Tenancy Act and you've got your Property Occupations Act, and then you also need to know, your fire legislation, and, there's a number of different sections of legislation you need to be on top of. So that's a full-time job in itself.
Yes.
Then receiving the rent, managing the tenancy, looking after any inspections, so ingoings, outgoings, and routine inspections, and then handling any maintenance. And that's just the basics. So you might have a tenant who has a complaint about a neighbour, or you've got a dividing fence issue or a tree issue. The property manager deals with all of that for you. We run insurance claims on behalf of, landlords. We pay their rates, their body corporate levies, their water bills, and then on top of that, we then invoice the tenants for water. So it's definitely a full-time job. And I think if you're trying to do this on your own whilst, running it, working yourself or running a full-time job, and then if you have a family, trying to get the kids around and also have a life, it's very difficult.
Absolutely agree. I've always said that if you're trying to self-manage a property, you've bought yourself a second job, and that's not actually an investment. That's a drain on your time. So way better to be the worst player in the room and get good professionals around you that are looking after you, and then just manage the manager. So, do you handle many interstate landlords in the portfolio of properties that yourself and the business looks after, Lauren?
Yeah, we've got quite a lot of landlords that are both interstate and also overseas. So, we handle the whole process for them. We take photos at inspections, we take photos at entries, exits. And I guess the other thing, if they're ever in Brisbane, we always love to meet them and have a look through the property together. So, but yeah, we've got lots of clients that aren't actually in Brisbane or local, and and they've chosen to invest in Brisbane.
Yeah, brilliant. Our business is helping quite a few investors moving into southeast Queensland as we speak, actually, given the high growth potential that we think it has at the sort of price points. Are there any additional challenges that come from looking after an interstate landlord over a local landlord, do you think, Lauren?
No, I really feel, the whole point of having a property manager is ideally to not be too involved. They manage everything and take the stress away from you. So whether you're local or interstate or overseas, really, it should all be fairly stress-free for an investor.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. I've had a good look at your book, Rented, which I think really sums up all of the key issues that a potential investor needs to consider both before, during and after getting involved in a property. And you cover some awesome subjects in that.
Thank you.
I'm particularly interested in having a bit of a chat to you about rent vesting, because we're quite strong proponents of rent vesters, particularly for young investors who may not have the ability to buy the dream home, but if they rent and then put all of their capacity into tax-deductible properties that, if they're structured well, won't cost them much, is a great way to set themselves up. What's your view on rent vesting, and what sort of exposure have you had to it with the landlords that you look after today?
We've got a number of landlords, and quite a few actually, that have investment properties that choose to rent elsewhere. And I think it's a great option. I mean, I think at the moment, in particular markets across Australia, there's an oversupply of apartments, and house and land packages, are quite often a good investment. So what we're finding, and I've got a number of friends who've purchased homes further away from the city, and then they still want to maintain their lifestyle. So they work in the city, so they're renting, within 4 kilometres of the city. They can run to work in the mornings and still, be able to go to restaurants and things like that. But they own an investment property that they eventually may want to live in, or it's, growing in capital growth in the meantime. That's not necessarily in the location that they actually want to live in.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of the best of both worlds. It's what we often say is access lifestyle, but own investments that are ultimately going to make you money, and not having to. I think we've all been brought up to believe that you have to put all your money into your home. But if we separate lifestyle from investment in that context, then you can pretty much have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome. One of the other subjects that you cover is co-ownership. Can you talk a little bit about co-ownership to those that may be having to look at that, given that individually they may be not able to secure property in their own right?
Yeah, so I guess it's just another option. So rather than just purchasing a property in your own name, it may be worth looking into purchasing a property with a second person, like it might be a family member or a friend. So there's a number of legalities. So you can purchase as a joint tenant. There's different options available out there for people. So, but I guess you also need to look into the risks, because it is similar to having a business partner, and you need to make sure that you've got, an agreement is signed before purchasing a property, just so that both parties have their interests assured there.
Yes, absolutely. One of the other subjects that I really enjoyed in the book, Lauren, was your discussion around the reasons that new landlords fail. Can you share with us what they are in essence?
Yeah, so I guess when you're a new landlord, there's a couple of things you need to be really careful of, and they can be, purchasing a property that may be an emotional decision as opposed to something that's going to be a good investment. So you may think that you want to purchase a property that, has a pool because you really like, you really wanted to have a pool yourself, or purchasing an investment that, might be close to a train station, or, I guess you've really got to think of who your target market is going to be, and aim to look at properties that are going to be able to attract those types of tenants in order to pay the highest rent. When also another thing to be careful is if you're managing a property yourself, you can form a personal relationship with the tenant. So they start ringing you on your mobile on a Sunday if there's a leak and things like that. It's just making sure you have those boundaries, because at the end of the day, it's a business and you should treat it as such.
Yes.
And also not charging market rent. So you might think, they've been really great tenants. I really like them. They've looked after the property. So I'll just leave the rent, below market rent, which it's one strategy, but it's also, if you have a property manager, that's their job to understand the market and know what rent you should be charging. And again, you've got to remember it's a business. And also not maintaining your investment property. So that's a really important thing, is, to make sure, like the silicon behind a kitchen's, maintained. It's not cracked, or, you're going to a property and, the carpet's torn, things like that. You just want to make sure that your property is presenting as well as possible and in a great condition, because not only is it a legislative requirement, but it's also, you're maintaining your asset.
Yeah, no, that's awesome advice. So if one of the listeners is either an existing landlord or they're about to invest in property, what advice do you give to them in terms of how to choose the right property manager, Lauren?
Yeah, so I guess I always recommend meeting the property manager. And actually in the book, which is rented, I've actually got a checklist in there on what you should be looking for when you choose a property manager.
Excellent.
But there's a number of things. So I guess you want to make sure that I always recommend specialist property management agencies. So they, rather than having an agency that focuses on sales as well as rentals, that they purely just do rentals because they tend to be a bit more focused on that.
Yes.
Making sure that they understand the legislation, asking them how many properties they actually manage and how long they've been at the agency for, and also finding out about their leasing process. So if you have a vacant property, how they're going to market your property so it stands out from the others in the marketplace. Do they do personal viewings? Do they hand out keys? What sort of background checks do they perform? Are they coming through on a regular basis to check your investment for routine inspections? And how do you know what are they actually checking when they go through? So there's a whole list that I've actually got and put together so that I would recommend asking a property manager just so you have a really good understanding of what your expectations are of them and what you can expect from them too.
Yeah, that's awesome. A couple of rules of thumb then that flow from those questions. So let's take a couple of those because the average landlord or investor really won't have a sense or feel for this. But one of the questions you mentioned was how many properties do you manage? What is the sort of number that's comfortable for a property manager to be able to achieve?
Yeah. It really depends on the structure of the business. So, if it's a portfolio business, which means that one property manager manages the entire process. So they might, and in our office, for example, we have someone who looks after the leasing of the properties. So her full-time job is to make sure that there's no vacancies.
Yes.
And then the property managers focus on the entry condition reports, the vacates, the maintenance, and the handling of any issues that may arise during the tenancy.
Right.
And we have a different person who does all the trust accounting. So, and typically a property manager would manage around about 100 properties, depending on their level of experience. So, it really just depends on their capabilities and how long they've been with the agency and their level of experience at the end of the day. But if you have got maybe a new property manager, they may not be able to manage 100 properties. They might be able to manage 10 or 15 initially until they gather that experience and understanding.
So if you were a landlord, let's say you're looking to get your own property managed, Lauren, what answers are you looking for to those key questions to make you feel comfortable that you've got the right person looking after your greatest investment?
Yeah, I guess I'd probably want to see an example of an entry condition report that they've completed because the entry condition report is probably one of the most important documents and it sort of sets the tone for the entire tenancy. Right. I'd want to know how often routine inspections are carried out and whether the property manager's doing those themselves or whether they've got, sometimes agencies outsource the routine inspections to another company or they may also have a junior staff member doing those.
Yes.
And I'd also want to make sure, will I be notified of all maintenance and do they have any systems or technology that handle that maintenance process?
Yes.
Because I think, they're the main things. The entry condition report, really saves you at the end with the vacate. And then during the tenancy, you want to make sure that the property's, regularly being checked and everything's in order.
No, that's very good advice. So the key thing I'm taking away from what you're saying is that the benefits of a portfolio approach where effectively you've got one property manager managing beyond leasing your property from end to end and therefore is totally across pretty much all of the issues associated with that property would be far more beneficial than the other option in the industry, which is the sort of pod approach where you've got a conveyor belt of people handling different aspects of it and therefore much greater opportunity that something's going to fall through the cracks. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, definitely. So I think quite often there's actually, quite a high turnover in property management in the industry. So the average property manager generally turns over every 6 months, which, no landlord wants to know about.
Right.
And I guess at the end of the day, you really want to know that the property manager is going to be the one at the beginning who's put the tenants in and also the one who's going to do the vacate at the end. So there's no sort of safeguard to say that they're going to be there the whole time. But ideally, you want to know they've been with the agency for a while and they're going to stay, ideally. So I think portfolio system is good because at least you have that relationship with the property manager. You ring the office, they know you, they know your property, and they know your tenants. Whereas if you're ringing an agency and you're dealing with maybe someone who's never seen your property, it's definitely not the same experience in terms of service.
Yeah, very good point. Now the other side of the coin here, I guess, is that in terms of having a successful business and a successful experience for your landlords, you've obviously got some criteria around landlords as well as tenants. So what sort of landlords and or properties do you say no to as a business, Lauren?
Yeah, so I normally go out and see every new management that we put on, and I feel like that's sort of a non-negotiable for me, and I really need to do that just to make sure that, it's not sort of a liability as well. So we really want to make sure that landlords are maintaining their property, not only for risk mitigation reasons for, themselves and our office, but also, to make sure that it's safe for the tenants. There's a number of requirements under the legislation. So like owning an investment property is actually a business, and you need to treat it as such. So, yes. And you need to be aware that, if you have cracks in your driveway or if you've got pavers that are lifting, that's actually a trip hazard and could be a potential risk. So it is really important to make sure that your property is well maintained.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think if a landlord wasn't prepared to look after their property or spend money, that would be a concern if there were risks at the property.
Okay, well, let's flip around to the other side. And what advice do you give investors in terms of the warning signs when you're looking out for choosing good tenants?
I guess, it's really important to make sure, like, we do all our checks on our end. So when we're doing our checks, we make sure that the tenant's not blacklisted on any database. We're also making sure that, if they own their own business, we're speaking to their accountant, we're getting financial information, we're speaking to their current employers if they're employed. We're checking all the previous rental references. If they own a property, we're checking on that as well. So doing as many possible checks as are available, and also making sure that, if these things aren't done, you could potentially have a risk of your landlord insurance not covering you if the basics haven't been met at the beginning of the tenancy. So that's probably one of the most important things, as well as the entry condition report, is making sure that you've done all the checks on the tenant. So there are always risks involved in owning an investment property, and tenants, you are dealing with people, so things can change in their life. So all you can do at the beginning is make sure you've done as many checks as possible to try and mitigate any risks there.
Yeah, awesome. One of the other subjects that a lot of landlords get concerned about is tenants having pets. Now, a lot of people have pets. What's your view of that, and what do you say to landlords who may have those concerns?
I really think, it comes back to the property and whether, it's suitable to have a pet there, and also the tenant as well. So, obviously there's good pet owners and not so good pet owners. So we ask for a pet reference, we ask for photos of the pet, and we try and gather as much information as possible. If we have a particular breed that the pet is, we look into what typically are the traits of that breed. But it really comes back to, whether the property is suitable. And we find that if it's a family home with a fully fenced yard, you are likely to attract a family with a pet. And by not allowing a pet, you really do limit your market. So I think it just comes back to, it's often something that should be considered upon application, depending on the property.
Okay, no, good thoughts around that. Okay, now sort of turning back to you and your business. I love talking about property management, as you can see, given that it's certainly been a big part of our own property journey to now. But having a look at yourself and your business now, I noticed in one of your media releases you talk about the fact that you've taken your business from 0 to 400 properties in 3 years. Can you tell us about that, and what challenges have you and your business experienced in enjoying that sort of massive growth?
Yeah, I guess I initially started the business on my own. So I had an opportunity to work from the back office of a developer's office, and he let me use a desk there, which was really, really great. So that helped initially when I was first starting out. And I worked there until I had about 70 properties that I was managing, and then I was able to afford an office space. But that was probably the hardest time when you're doing everything on your own. So you're answering all the phone calls, you're emptying the bins, you're doing the mail,
massive,
plus all your normal property management jobs. You're trying to lease properties, do all the trust accounting, pay the tradespeople, and it can be quite overwhelming. And I spent a lot of time at the office in that first year. But it does get easier, and as you grow, you've got support staff, and it's definitely a lot easier after a while. So now I've been going now for 4.5 years, and we manage nearly 500 properties now. So
massive. Well done.
And we've got this 6 of us at the office now, which is much easier.
I'm hearing a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and many late nights and lots of weekends in those early days.
Yes.
Talk to me about the decision to open your own property management business. You're obviously working for a successful business of quite some time, and you mentioned that business was sold. Was that's what prompted you to make that decision? Talk to us about your thinking at the time, if you can, please, Lauren.
Yeah, I never wanted to own a business, to be honest. That was never something that I just never thought, it's not something that I ever thought I ever wanted to do. But I actually was studying a marketing degree whilst I was working. And I'd been doing that for 9 years whilst working full time. And so I finally finished. So after I worked at the office for 8 years, where they had, grew up to 2,000 properties. I worked for another office after that doing business development for 3 years.
Okay.
And then I actually was approached by a developer who said, you should start your own. Would you like to, use the back of my office to start? And I thought, well, it's probably a really good opportunity to do so. And at the time I said no initially. And then I sort of came around in thinking and because obviously it's a big step going from, earning a decent income to basically, earning nothing, and sort of, and you're used to going into an office and having, heaps of emails and being really busy, and to all of a sudden walking in and you've got on a single email and you've got to generate a business, which is not so easy.
No, absolutely. I have shared that journey on a number of occasions, and so looking back now, what's been your biggest challenge in your career today, and what have you learned from that?
I think initially in that first, probably the first 6 months, when you're incredibly exhausted, you're earning less than half of what you were before, and you're working more hours than you've ever done before. I just was sort of thinking, why am I doing this? And I had probably 3 people approach me at the time to go into partnerships with them, and I seriously considered that, just because I just couldn't see how this would get any better. And I'm glad I didn't. I persevered. I feel like now the decisions are a lot easier to make when it's just, solely one director.
Totally, and I would absolutely endorse that decision. Having been involved in a number of partnerships over the years, while they've been very beneficial to get you to a certain point in time, there's still an element of compromise that comes in when you're having to satisfy a number of people's needs. So what gave you the resilience to say, well, no, I think I'll just soldier on? Can you remember what your thinking was at the time?
I asked a few people around me, and everyone sort of had said, if you can hang in there and, perhaps look at hiring someone. And it's hard to do when you can't afford to hire someone, but I sort of thought, no, I need to do that, and I'll jump onto that. I'll take that path rather than a partnership, and then reassess it in maybe 6 months' time and see how I'm feeling at that point. Okay. And I'm really glad I did that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would full praise to you in having the solitude and the resilience to be able to overcome that mountain, because it's the old story, when your business gets to a certain critical mass, all of a sudden things start to change. And clearly the growth for yourself and the business has been exponential since then, and with the amount of industry recognition that you're achieving, and taking the time out to write a book. So talk to me about that, having taken 18 months to write my own book, and it's a very interesting journey. Talk to me about the book writing experience. Why did you do it? What's been the benefits to you and to others of going through that, please, Lauren?
Yeah, so obviously I did a program to write the book, and that was a really good experience. I guess it sort of set out the stages of it. We did a 30-day writing challenge, so where every day you wrote 1,000 words, and it's actually been a really great experience. I had a book launch in March this year, and since then I've done a number of radio talks, and I also did some work with a major bank on talking about millennials purchasing investment properties, and there's been some great opportunities that have come out of writing this book. So I'd highly recommend it. It's also been a really good tool for our clients and potential new clients because it sets out in the book a lot of the questions we often get asked by new landlords in particular. So we've given in the book, there's checklists and a lot of information on, the process or what to look for when you're purchasing a new investment. So, and it sort of just helped me in my own mind clarify the process and really just make sure that it was really clear in my own head what steps a new investor does take and then be able to write all the checklists for those.
Brilliant. Now, given that as a background and the deep thinking work you've done in helping others through the book, what are some of the bad recommendations you hear in your industry in relation to property management, Lauren?
I guess often, you hear an investor might think that we're all the same and they choose a property management company purely based on, cheap fees. And I think it's really important to make sure, like anything, you get what you pay for.
Yes.
And I think it is really important to do your homework and maybe not just go with, the sales. Like if you purchased a property through a sales agent, maybe don't just go with their property management arm. Have a look around and see what other options are out there, because the level of service you may receive, could be the difference between having a successful investment property and a not so successful investment property. So I think it is really important to do your research and understand the market. And I've had friends looking to purchase investments and perhaps the information they've received may not be correct in that, I think if you're looking at rental appraisals or wanting to know the value, I'd talk to a couple of different third-party property management companies just to understand really the true value of the rent rather than just going with what you've been told through the sales agent.
That's very good advice. I've heard an expression a number of times that the difference between paying for a good property manager and a bad one's often about a cup of coffee a week.
That's it.
And if you're prepared to put your property, which is your greatest investment, at risk for a cup of coffee a week, then you've really got to consider the decision that you're making. So, I 100% agree with everything you're saying there, Lauren. It's, as I keep saying, the property manager is the key person in the success of a property investment journey long term, because if you've got a good one and they hang around for the long term, then the journey can be very easy because everything's being looked after. So that's awesome. Now, sort of coming back to yourself and sort of looking to the future, Lauren, can you talk to us about what your dream lifestyle looks like and how that might differ from what your current lifestyle is, and what are you going to invest in between now and then to bridge the gap?
So I guess like last year I purchased a commercial property, which is different to what I had been looking at previously. And I think what I'm looking at doing next is actually my partner, he owns an investment property as well. So between the two of us, we're actually looking at renting for a little while together, rent vesting, and trying to work out where we want to purchase a home. So that's our next step.
Awesome.
And then from there, purchase a home to live in together. So I guess in the future, I'm probably wanting to continue to grow my portfolio. I really do see it as a great form of setting yourself up for your future and having that reoccurring income there for the future when you do retire. So yeah, I plan on continuing to invest in property. I think it's been a really great experience so far, and I've got a couple of properties now, and yeah, I'm definitely going to be continuing on that path.
Excellent. Now, in my own study, looking at successful people in all walks of life, time and time again, I see that a lot of Australians invest in their work, their career, and they focus on just the income side. Where those that I've seen achieve true freedom also invest in growth assets that over time replace their active work income with passive income. You're obviously investing in your business. You're investing in property as a means to help you, put you in that position where you're getting more time back to do things you enjoy doing. Apart from those, is there anything else that you would consider investing in as you move forward, Lauren?
I guess in terms of education, so I'm constantly, like every year I've been doing a course. So I've done, not only have I done my business degree, but I've also done 3 separate business accelerator courses.
Okay.
So every year I've done one since I've started the business.
Brilliant.
I also, I go to a lot of networking events, and if there's any education that I can attend that to help grow both myself and the business, I'm all for that. So that's probably, and I actually really love learning. So I think that's anything that I can do to learn more and to grow my business essentially is what I want to focus on. I don't know enough about shares and things like that, so I'm not, I still feel that property is where I'll be investing majority of my time, and also in the business. So
Yes. Awesome. Okay, now I'm going to do a complete pivot here for a minute, Lauren, because this is a little hobby horse of mine, because I still sense that way too many Australians are working very hard and paying way too much tax. So what are the top things that you've done to save tax and keep more of your hard-earned in your pocket?
Yeah, I guess, owning an investment property and also spending money on that investment property to maintain it has really helped with saving tax.
Yep.
And I think, that's probably my number one tip is to, if you have an investment property and you need to, do any upgrades or maintenance, then to look at it as a tax deduction. So it's an expense that you can claim often. So, and I'd speak to your accountant on what you can and can't claim. But I think, maintaining your investment is a great way to also grow that wealth in the property, and make sure your property is being well maintained and getting the best rental return.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. Okay, now look, I'm going to enter what I call the ambush bushfire lightning round now, Lauren, which is playing on my nickname, of course. Just a couple of very quick questions. So, starting off, what quote do you live your life by or think of often?
I really liked, so there was I did a course a few years ago, which was Business Blueprint, and they said that you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting, which means, I guess it's really important to continue to grow and learn. Otherwise, you get left behind and you sit and you rot. So I often think of that.
Brilliant. And what's the one book that you, apart from yours, that you recommend our listeners should have a look at, and why?
I really liked Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I think that was probably one of the first property investment books I read when I was 19. And I learned a lot from it. I think it really just sets a really good understanding of how to grow wealth, and that's probably been a key to what I've done today.
Absolutely. I call it my Kiyosaki moment. It was a big light bulb moment for me a long time ago. I won't tell you how many years because I'll start showing my age, but it's certainly some gold there in terms of the principles that you need to start living by, particularly with the focus on generating passive income rather than focusing on active work income.
Yeah.
So, brilliant. What about podcasts? You're a podcast listener. Are there any favourite podcasts that you listen to regularly, Lauren?
There's a couple of podcasts. I typically listen to property-related podcasts. nothing that I can think of off the top of my head, but there's a couple that I do have on my regular list. It's all property based. So
there's some great.
There's so many out there now.
Yeah, I love Kevin Turner. I love the breadth and depth of the stuff that he goes through, and I think you've been a guest on there at one stage early this year too, from memory.
He's fantastic. Yeah, I often listen to his podcast as well. So he's great.
He's a good one. Now, what's the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received, Lauren?
I guess it's more. I think learning. My previous employer had said to me, make hay while the sun shines. And I think that comes back to getting into the market now whilst you're young, and, work hard at chipping away at that so that you can, enjoy yourself later in life. So I think, paying down those mortgages and, reap the rewards later.
Yeah, it's spot on. Time is your friend, and if you get in early enough, it makes the journey so much easier.
No, definitely.
Starting at 21, one of the smart ones is there's way too many partying until they get into their 30s and even 40s before they start thinking about it. And we have quite a few investors who come to us in their 50s, and I call it their oh shit moment, because suddenly they realise super's not going to get them there, and that they need to pull rabbits out of a hat to get themselves in a position where they can maintain their lifestyle long term. So that's awesome. Just to close then, what's a personal habit that contributes most to your investment success so far?
I guess one of the things I do is I'm constantly on the lookout for property, and not only do I have the luxury or I'm very fortunate to be able to work with property investors every day, and I see a lot of investment properties, but I'm also on realestate.com every single day of the week, so looking to buy and also at rental properties. So I have a really good understanding of the market, which has definitely helped when I look to purchase my own properties. I know sort of what demographic of tenants are likely to rent that property, and also, whether that should be around that market value or not.
Yeah, spot on. Now, given the exposure you've had to investment personally, but also the number of landlords that you've assisted over the years, if you were to draw together and perhaps think of the most successful one that you've worked alongside, what have they done, and what has been the keys, do you think, to their success in property?
I think, there's a number of successful investors that we work with on a regular basis, and I think the key has been that they've used the equity in their investment to purchase again. So they've been able to grow, great portfolios, and some of them, have retired early, and they've been able to, they live off the profits of those portfolios, and they know when to get out too. So, they look at the market and they know when's a good time to sell and or reinvest as well. So, I've learned a lot from those people.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, look, really appreciate you dedicating so much of your precious time, given I know how busy you and the business are. It's life as a property manager is always frantic. So really appreciate you being so generous and having a chat to me, Lauren.
No, thanks, Bush. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
It's been awesome. I think we're both graduates of the Key Person of Influence program, which it's certainly been life-changing for me in terms of helping me to get very clear on our message and how to communicate that, and writing the book has certainly been very cathartic in that process, and I'm sure you've enjoyed the same experience in that regard. So
definitely.
Good people in property are hard to come by, Lauren, so keen to stay in touch.
Yes,
the Get Invested podcast will continue to focus on issues that are important in the investment arena, and as I said a couple of times, property investment is very key in that, and you're closer to the ins and outs of the property journey more so than anyone, given the length of time you spend managing properties across a broad range of areas. So I'd love the opportunity to come back to you and talk to you about changes in the industry and challenges and what some of the innovative solutions might be in terms of really optimising an investment portfolio.
Sounds great. Yep, be happy to be part of that.
Terrific, Lauren. Well, you have a fantastic day. Thanks again, and
Thanks,
we'll look forward to talking soon.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye for now.
Bye.
How good was that? I hope you enjoyed it. To get a summary of all the investment gold and to get a copy of the show notes, email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.khgroup.com.au/get invested. And join me next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. Thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.